أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله. The qira'ah for people that could tell the difference. Some people aren't used to hearing Warsh, although I think Imam Warsh, his qira'ah is getting more recognition because of some really good reciters from the East that are starting to recite with it. But Imam Warsh, radiallahu anhu, was from Egypt, and he was a student of Imam Nafi', who was the Muqri of Al-Madinah, and he actually led the prayer for 60 years in the Prophet's Masjid. He was a teacher of Imam Malik. Imam Malik actually is considered from the Qurra, from the scholars that took and were masters of the Qira'ah. But Imam Nafi' was he was a black man, and he was also noted for his, what they say, du'aba. كانت فيه du'aba. He liked to joke, but when it came to the Qur'an, he was extremely serious. And he also, it was noted that he had a scent of misk that people could smell when he spoke. It really came out of his mouth. It smelled like misk. He had two major students, one, and the qira'at, there are 7 mutawatir, qira'at mutawatira, and these can be read in the prayer, canonically. And basically, the only ones that we use now in the Muslim world are the qira'ah of Imam Nafi' and Asim and Abu Amr, which is used in Sudan. But most countries now read with Asim, and Imam Hafs was the student of Imam Asim. So you have the qira'ah, and then you have the actual variant of the qari. So with Imam Nafi', you have the two variants, Qalun and Warsh. So Imam Warsh is recited. His riwayah also has the Asfahani variant and the Azraq variant. So even the variants take on nuanced readings also. But Imam Warsh, his variant is read in almost all of North Africa, with the exception of Libya, which recites Qalun, and some places in Tunis. But people like in West Africa, in Mauritania, they learn Nafi', they learn both variants. They learn Warsh and Qalun. And the Hafidh is only considered a Hafidh once he masters both variants. One of the interesting aspects of Imam Nafi''s reading is Imam Malik radiallahu anhu considered it a sunnah over the other readings. And the reason for that is that Nafi', and particularly the variant of Warsh, is in the language of Quraysh. So the things that you heard, the fact that they don't use a Hamza in things like yuminun, and then the mudud that are very long. Warsh has the longest of the mudud. And then also the imala that you hear, which is when the fatha moves towards a kasra sound. So the Imam Malik considered it a sunnah, and he also, Imam Ahmad preferred Nafi' over the other qira'at. He was asked about the qira'at and he said, أُفَضِّلُ نَافِعًا وَإِلَّا فَعَاصِمْ. If I'd rather have Nafi', but if I can't, then Asim is the second reading. But all of them are mutawatira, and the Prophet ﷺ allowed for variant readings, and one of the interesting aspects of that is the fact that ikhtilaf is part of our ummah. So one of the unusual aspects of Islam is that we have, without councils, without synods, without magisteria, which are the means that other religions have used to try to create unity, there is a unity in diversity in Islam that you don't find in other religions, and that's embodied in the Qur'an itself. The fact that there are different ways to recite the Qur'an, and they're all correct. And so Allah loves diversity, and it's reflected in His creation that He's created us with diverse colors, different languages, different habits also even, and clothing and all these things, but also diversity in nature. One of the aspects of modern society is homogenization, which is to make everything similar. So wherever you go, the hotels are the same. We could be in Abu Dhabi, we could be in Cairo, we could be in Paris. It doesn't matter because it's all the same. The chandeliers are bought from the same company, and everything becomes homogenized. Whereas in our tradition, there's a beauty in these differences of culture and pronunciations, the way people pronunciate words. And so, now the other aspect, and I want to mention this because I think it's an important point. The desire for uniformity is actually a type of, it's a sickness of the heart. You know, when people want everything to be the same, it's a sickness in the heart. And Muslims that want all the Muslims to behave and act and look and be the same are actually reflecting a type of illness. And that's why it's important to note this about the Qur'an, that even in the recitation, there's difference. The Fatiha, if you hear somebody do the different types of Fatiha, just the Fatiha alone, you would be amazed at how many ways the Fatiha can be recited. In Warsh, they say Maliki Yawmiddin. In Hafs, it's Maliki Yawmiddin. They're completely different meanings, Malik and Milik. Malik is a possessor, Milik is a king or a sovereign. And so the meaning has changed, but the meaning, every king is a Malik and every Malik, every king is a possessor, but not every possessor is a king. So one is universal and the other is particular. It's an aspect of the king, is that he's Malik as well as Milik. He not only has sovereignty, but he owns everything. And that's in the old understanding of a sovereign, an absolute sovereign. So they're not mutually exclusive. They're complementary meanings, because the idea on Yawm al-Qiyamah, liman al-mulk al-yawm, who owns everything on this day. So people, not only do they recognize the Milik, but they recognize the milkiya of the Malik, that he possesses everything on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. They recognize both aspects, that not only is Allah sovereign, but He's an absolute sovereign. Because some sovereigns, you have constitutional monarchs, you have monarchs so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an absolute sovereign on the day of judgment, when everybody will recognize that. So that's important. Now, the other very interesting thing about the unity in diversity as opposed to uniformity is that our religion is the only religion in the world that is a world religion, in that it has many, many followers. I mean, there's sects that might have a type of unity, but it's the only religion where you can go to a masjid anywhere irrespective of what type of masjid. It could be a Bralvi masjid, it could be a Deobandi masjid, it could be a Sufi masjid or a Salafi masjid or a Maliki or a Hanafi or a Hanbali or a Zaydi or a Ibadi or a Ithna Ashari. I mean, and on and on and on. There's lots of variations of Muslims out there. But what is so fascinating is the Qibla is the same. So all those people that have these different variations of Islam, when they go to Mecca and Medina, they all face the same Qibla. They pray behind the Imam. The basic form of the prayer is the same. There's slight differences. You move your finger, where you put your hands, what you do in the particulars of the prayer. There are some slight differences. But the unity is actually quite extraordinary. There's really nothing like it in any religion. Because the Jews don't all have, they can't go to, the synagogues are very different. There's synagogues where the men and women are mixed. There's synagogues where there's a woman who's the rabbi or the cantor. Or you go to churches, you might get a rock mass. You might get a very stripped down type of mass. Lots of different things. But with Islam, and the reason you don't, and the reason for that is that Islam has inherent antibodies against changes to anything that's essential to the faith. And that is because the Prophet ﷺ put so much emphasis on the fact that the previous religions had changed their teachings. They had changed them. And so people that call for this kind of reformation of Islam today, they immediately red flags for Muslims should go up. People that want to change this religion that has been handed down for centuries. There's things that are wrong with the Muslims. But Islam is the same teaching. Nothing's changed. And there's differences of opinion. There's all those things. But that's part of the tradition, that there's all these differences. So it's important to remember that when we look, because the qira'at are a very fascinating aspect of that. And so it was really nice to hear such a beautiful recitation from the Imam. Now, before I go into the actual surah, I wanted to give you what would be called a heuristic tool. It's a type of tool that comes from Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi, who was a Granadan scholar. He was from Spain. Really brilliant scholar. His tafsir, Tasheel li Ulum al-Tanzil, is a favorite tafsir of a lot of scholars. And there's reasons for that are quite obvious for anybody that's ever looked into it. But it's a very short tafsir, but for some reason he was able to pack an incredible amount of meaning in very, very concise phrasing. But he basically identifies a means of looking at verses of the Qur'an and understanding the Qur'an. So I wanted to go over that. I wish I had a blackboard because I think it would help to do this. But basically the first thing is that the Qur'an is first and foremost a book. In fact, that's one of the names of the Qur'an. Al-Qur'an, Al-Furqan, Al-Dhikr, and Al-Kitab. Those are the 4 names of the Qur'an. All of the other names are considered adjectives, whereas those are the substantives that identify what the Qur'an is. The Qur'an is, there's difference of opinion, but the dominant opinion is from the qara'a, which is a reading or a recital. And the Arabs, one of the most important aspects of the Arabic language is the vastness of it and the ability to say many different things with the same words. But the Arabs use qira'ah to mean to recite something like aqra'uhum minni as-salam, recite to him my greeting. So it doesn't mean read to him. It literally means just say assalamu alaikum fulan yusallimu alayka. So and so says salamu alaikum. So you can say that in Arabic. So when Jibreel said iqra, read or recite, the Prophet ﷺ negated both aspects, because on the one hand he was not a qari, he was not somebody who read, but nor was he a rawi. He didn't recite poetry, he didn't do what the Arabs did in their gatherings, because a lot of Arabs memorized massive amounts of poetry and they would be able to read from that poetry or recite it by rote. So the Prophet negated, he said, "Ma ana biqari," I don't know how to read, which is one meaning of it. But the Jibreel alayhi salam said, "Iqra" again, وَغَطَّهُ, you know, he pulled him so hard until he said, "Balagha minni al-juhud," like that he thought his sides were going to crush into. He did that 3 times. And then the revelation begins, "Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq." So the revelation begins with Iqra, read or recite. And it's interesting because reading has different elements to it. One of the elements of reading is to just the actual act of reading is quite an extraordinary thing. The ability to read signs. And this is a lot of interest now in Western universities is on semiotics and signs. In fact, a lot of philosophy now has been reduced to studying signs. They're very fascinated by this, the ability to read signs, but also to create schemas out of the world, that when we see things, the mind naturally puts things together. That's why we're so prone to conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories are the way the mind deals with sometimes random events or events that don't really make sense. We try to make sense out of them by creating things that might not necessarily be there. They might be, but they might not necessarily, and oftentimes they're not. But the mind is very good at that, and it's good at reading and interpreting. So when you read something, you can read it on a lot of different levels. And obviously, the iqra that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling is a new type of reading or a renewed type of reading, because ma undira aba'ukum, you know, that this is something that your fathers had not been aware of. So this new reading, the qira'ah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about is the idea of reading signs. And so the Qur'an, the definition of the Qur'an is that it's a reminder, it's a furqan, it's a standard or a criterion by which you judge between truth and falsehood. It's a recital and a reading, so it's both recited and it's read as a book. And what's interesting about that is orality and literacy are the 2 ways that human beings have existed throughout history. Everybody enters into the world in a state of orality. In other words, they're in a state of being unable to read, illiterate. And that's the primary mode of human beings. Literacy is something that's acquired, and it's actually acquired with difficulty. It's not easy to become literate. You have to understand words, and then you need to learn signs. And if you look at children, there are a lot of ways that children can have problems with reading, but reading is actually very miraculous. People don't think about reading very much, but reading is very miraculous. The fact that we can take symbols and that have sounds, phonemes, put them together and create these dyadic sounds that then generate unbelievable meaning. The amount of meaning that can be generated with the 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet is beyond belief. Really, it's quite difficult to fathom. And every language has immense sophistication. Even the most primitive languages, in fact, some of the most primitive languages are the most sophisticated languages. So it's like DNA. It just doesn't get simple. The deeper you go, the more complicated it gets. And so the Qur'an has all of these elements, and then it's a proof of the veracity of the Prophet ﷺ's teaching. But if the ulama define it as being something that is mu'jiz, that it incapacitates. It's muhabihi. It's revealed ila Muhammad, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad, in order for it to be recited, للتلاوة وللتعبد. Sidi Abdullah ibn Hajj Ibrahim says, لَفْظٌ مُنَزَّلٌ عَلَى مُحَمَّدِ لِأَجْلِ التِّلَاوَةِ وَلِلتَّعَبُّدِ, that it's something that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in order for it to be recited and as a way of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and drawing near to Allah by following its injunctions, avoiding its prohibitions, understanding its meaning. And so when you look at, if you want a definition of Qur'an, that's one definition. That's the standard kind of ulama definition that you'll find in Tafsir. But Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi gives a very simple definition that I think works incredibly well, because one of the important aspects of our religion is that although it's centered around the Qur'an, there is an immense illiteracy about what the Qur'an is. There are many, many Muslims that can read the Qur'an. Some read it very well. But you would, I think, be astounded at the numbers of Muslims that have a complete lack of understanding about what the book is actually about. Now, I'll give you an example. If you take an average Baptist who's serious about their religion, all right, and I'm talking about Christians that are serious about, they will have, and I'm not saying to do this with the Quran, but they will have a very dog-eared Bible that's been just used over, and you'll see like stickums and cross-referencing and all these, because they go every Sunday and they have a preacher that is cross-referencing and then turn to James 3:16, and they all turn to James 3:16. There's a study that goes on that is very absent in the Muslim world. A serious study of the book. What does this book say? Now, if you ask the average Christian what Genesis is about, and I'm talking about a devout Christian, they could tell you the plot of the book. In the beginning, God created. They'll tell you about Adam and Eve. They get exiled from paradise. They can tell you about building the Tower of Babel. They can tell you about the flood. They can tell you all these things that happen. And they basically know the theme of that book. But if you ask Muslims, what is Surah Al-Baqarah about? What is it about? Is there a theme to it? Do you see? And the thing about the Qur'an, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ, don't they think deeply about this book? Tadabbur is to take something to the end of it. The dubar is what's behind. So tadabbur is to really make an effort to get to the end of something, to exhaust it to as much as you're able to. Now, the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith which is sahih, and everybody, I think, has heard it if they've gone to Jum'ah, or مَجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بِيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُم. That no group of people will get together in a house from the houses of God, reciting the book of Allah. But then it says, يَتَدَارَسُونَهُ. Now, tadarus in Arabic is, in sarf, it's used for musharaka, when people actually work together to understand something. What's happened in our community is we have created these approaches to the book in which you have a group of people that are called the ulama, and they learn, and they spend a lot of time learning it, and then we go into a passive receptive mode. So people are empty, and the person comes and they fill them up with information or something like that. And that's one way of learning, and there's no doubt there's benefits to that way of learning. For instance, grammar is grammar. There's debates about grammar, but basically grammar is grammar. You either know what a fa'il is or you don't know what a fa'il is, but we're not going to sit around and discuss what a fa'il is. Like, what do you think, Zayd? Well, I think it could be, or maybe it's no. A fa'il is, there's a very specific definition to a fa'il. And then it has rulings that go with it. And then the maf'ul, there's mansubat. You learn them. And there's difference of opinion about them. You can get into that. Like some things, they'll differ. Can that be mansub or not? And grammarians will get into, these are when you get into the inner recesses of grammar. But generally, grammar is something that if you know it, you can teach it. And if you don't know it, you should shut up until you've learned it. It's very important. Because if you don't know what a conditional sentence is, you'll mistake what people are saying. If you don't, in the Qur'an, the most important book for understanding the Qur'an, I would say, is Mughni al-Labib, which deals with all those like the fa. There's all these different types of fa in the Qur'an. There's different types of ma in the Qur'an. There's different types of hatta in the Qur'an. And you have to work out which one's being used here. And they're not always clear on it. Even the mufassirun differ. And sometimes they'll say this is the arjah, this is the dominant opinion. And other times they'll say Allahu a'lam. And sometimes they'll say yahtamil al-wajhain. You can take it to mean both. It can have both. And there's benefit to that. There's real benefit to that. But it's important to remember that if you don't have the tools of grammar and also balagha is very important. I'll give you an example in Arabic. In Arabic, when you read the Qur'an, one of the things that Western people have that they find really problematic about the Qur'an is it's always changing. It goes from the first person to the second person to the third person, and it's disorienting for Western people because they do not have a rhetorical device that the Arabs use, which is called iltifat. Iltifat is to switch persons. And the Arabs do it for a very specific reason. They do it in their pre-Islamic poetry. And it's a rhetorical device to cause a type of, to keep the listener's attention, to make them think about what you're saying. I had a teacher, Allah yarhamuhu, Sheikh Shaybani. He was one of my favorite teachers. But he used to, when he would teach me, he would always pull on my fingers. And sometimes hard. And sometimes he would slap me. Just like he would hit me and say, "Did you get that?" And I realized it was like the Zen master that comes around with the stick and hits the people doing the sazen to keep them present. Because the mind wanders. There's probably some people in here already, their mind is wandering, and they're wondering what's everybody laughing about. Because they were somewhere, they were in Fort Hood or who knows where they were. They're thinking about this, that, or the other. So it's that technique in the Qur'an is a very important technique. It's right there in the Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyaka. So it goes from ghaiba to khatab. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina. Right? So right there, and the ulama say it goes from ghaiba to hudur. That you open the Qur'an and you open your prayer in a state, you're moving towards presence. So it begins, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And it's getting, you come into with the mercy and then the jalal of Allah. He's Rabbil Alameen, He's Maliki Yawmiddin. And then Maliki Yawmiddin, I'm going to meet Him, Iyaka. The presence is there. So that is iltifat in the Qur'an. That technique is a device that the Arabic language uses to pull you into presence, to bring you back. And so if you don't know these things, the Qur'an is a very difficult read. And another aspect of the Qur'an is just the Arabic language. I had another teacher, Sheikh Abdurrahman, who used to say, العلم بحر بغوص الماهرين فيه تلف اليواقيت والمراجين. That knowledge is an ocean. And when people that understand it swim in it, when they swim in it, تلف اليواقيت فيه والمراجين. They find pearls and coral and لكنه غير مأمون تماسحه. But the sharks and the crocodiles and those things that'll eat you up, you're not safe from them if you don't know how to swim in there. وَلَيْسَ فِي كُلِّ مَوْجٍ فِيهِ دَلْفِينُ. And there's not a dolphin in every wave to help you. Right? The Arabs say delphin. If you look in Mukhtar al-Sihah, which is a short, an abridged version by Al-Razi of the Sihah, which is one of the great books. And he wrote it for beginners, and he'll have words in there, because it was the first dictionary that I really learned pretty well when I was first studying Arabic. I spent a lot of time in that. But I'd look up a word and he'd say ma'loom, like everybody knows it. You know, like I don't know it. But if you look in this book, Mukhtar al-Sihah, he says about dukhas, he says that this is a fish in the ocean, and yuqalu lahu delphin. It's also called a dolphin. And it says, yunajji al-ghariq. He saves the drowning man. Yumakkinuhu min dhahrihi wa yuwassiruhu ila al-barr. You know, he puts him on his back and takes him to dry land. So the Arabs had a good regard for the dolphin. And that's why he says that knowledge, there's danger in this ocean of knowledge, and there's not always dolphins there to save you, because people go astray. The Qur'an, everybody in the history of Islam that has gone astray, went astray by interpreting verses and hadith in other than the way they should have been interpreted. Everybody. And that's why if you don't know and Arabs think they know the Arabic language because it's their language, and there's no doubt they know a type of Arabic. They're speaking Arabic, even if there's broken Arabic now, or there's a lot of reduction in the Arabic that's used today. But nonetheless, it's still Arabic, and many of the words that the ancient Arabs used are still used in Arabia and amongst the Arabs. I mean, Egyptians use words that are Quranic all the time. And even Moroccans, who people would argue in the East, whether that was Arabic or not, it is Arabic. And once you get used to it, you actually there's some really enjoyable things about Moroccan Arabic. Like if a Moroccan gets mad, they say, billati, billati, you know. And they mean, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. You know, but they just say, billati, billati, you know, and it just means calm down in Moroccan Arabic. But it comes from that verse, you know, don't get angry, turn the other cheek type thing. So, but you'll find hadith, the Prophet said, لَعْنَ اللَّهُ السَّارِقَ يَسْرِقُ الْبَيْضَةَ فَتُقْطَعُ يَدُهُ. May God curse the thief who steals an egg and gets his hand cut off. Now people can say, if you read that, it says if you steal an egg, you get your hand cut off. But that's not what the hadith means. That hadith means that people start off stealing little things, like an egg, and they don't think that it's a big deal, but later on they steal something big and they get their hand cut off. So the Prophet ﷺ used a very abridged, succinct language that had massive amount of meaning. He said, "Utitu jawami al-kalim." I was given these comprehensive words. A comprehensive word is the one that the simplest people understand it at one level, the middle people understand it at another level, and then the arifin and the ulama understand it at a completely different level, and all the levels are valid. And the Prophet ﷺ had that gift. So when you look at this definition of Qur'an, I think it's a really extraordinary definition of Qur'an and very useful. So if somebody asks you what the Qur'an is, you can say that he says all of the knowledges are contained in the Qur'an. And this is, we believe this. مَا فَرَّطْنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We've left nothing out of this book. And so he says, you can talk about this you can generalize about it, and then you can go into details. As for a general statement of what the Qur'an is, he says the Qur'an is دعوة الخلق إلى عبادة الله وإلى الدخول في دينه. That's the definition of Qur'an. If you want a definition of Qur'an, that is the definition. It is the invitation of creation to the worship of the Creator and to enter into His deen. To enter into the deen of His. That's what the Qur'an is. It's da'wah. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, he said that the Qur'an is ma'dabatullah. It's and ma'dubatullah also. That it is a place where one learns discipline and adab, but it's also a banquet. Because the ma'duba is a banquet. It's the place you go where the Sayyid invites everybody to feast. But when you go into the Sayyid's gathering, you have to have adab. And so the Arabs use that word to indicate that it's a place of adab. The banquet is a place of adab. Now what's interesting about banquets, and this is one of the Persian poets says this, Hafil, says, if you realize that the world is God's banquet, He's brought everybody here and this is His banquet. And he said, and you realize that you were just one of the guests, how would you view everyone else? Because everybody's here by invitation of God. It doesn't matter who they are. The Jew, the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Jain, the atheist, everybody has been invited here. And their life is a full life. It's not, we see people at points in time and we assume that that point in time is that's all. Because most exchanges between human beings are utilitarian. I need this or I need that. That's most exchanges with people. They're utilitarian. We use people, right? And we honor things. If you look how people treat things in their house, they treat them, they don't want to break the vase, so they'd never knock the vase over, but there's people that just bump into other people and push them out of the way. So they honor things, but humans or animals, because animals have rights as well. There's people in this culture, lawyers, that are trying to assert that animals have legal standing and that they should be able to have class action suits, and that lawyers would act on behalf of the owl or behalf of, there's people that's a very Islamic view that we actually do believe. And we know that animals came to the Prophet ﷺ and used him as their advocate against people that were wronging them. We know that the camel complained about being given too much, and the Prophet told the man to not burden the camel with more than it could bear. We know about the gazelle that complained to the Prophet ﷺ that it had some foes in, and that it hadn't finished suckling, which is also an indication about hunting. There's laws in this country, the times that you can hunt. These are very humane Islamic principles, the idea of not hunting out of season, because animals have their offspring and they're taking care of them. So if you shoot the doe when it's during their season that they're nurturing their offspring, you've orphaned these animals that don't have. Our religion takes all that into consideration, which is quite extraordinary. So if you look that this is a banquet, that it's an invitation, it's a da'wah. Now, what the beautiful thing about a da'wah is, you have, like, when you get an invitation, it says RSVP sometimes. Respondez s'il vous plaît, like, please respond. So it's a courtesy just to say, I can't come. That's what they're asking, because, some they don't care. Whether if you come, let us know. If you don't. You don't have to let us know. But the da'wah of Allah is an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's not only created us and we're His slaves, but He's treated us in this I-thou relationship, to put it in modern philosophers' terms. The idea that we have dignity. لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that we have ennobled and dignified the children of Adam. And so the way we speak to them, the way we address them, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ, not يَا أَيُّهَا الْحُقَرَاء الْحَمْقَاء الْغَافِلُونَ, you idiots, you fools. Really, it's speaking to them, al-insan. You're something amazing, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I'm putting in the earth a caliph. So it's an invitation for all of creation, meaning here al-alamin. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said that the alamin are the ins and the jinn. Even though it contains the meaning of the worlds, the Arabs have different types of plurals. So the awalam is worlds when it's not aql. There's no rationality there. So awalam, Allah doesn't say Rabb al-awalam. He says Rabb al-alameen. And the alameen are the ins and the jinn. They're the ones that can respond to Allah and acknowledge Allah in a way that's rational, as opposed to, say, animals that are in submission to Allah, but they don't have the cognitive understandings that human beings have. They do their tasbih and they do it, but it's not like human beings or ins or jinn. So this is an invitation to creation to worship Allah and enter into His deen. And then He says, but this lofty goal necessitates two things. And you have to have them. And all of the Qur'an goes back to these two things. All of the Qur'an. So the first is بيان العبادة التي دعي الخلق إليها والأخرى ذكر بعث تبعثهم على الدخول فيها. So the first is to clarify what that ibadah is that they've been invited to. The Qur'an is there to clarify what it is. So it's da'wat al-haq ila ibadatillah. They're being called to worship Allah. So the Qur'an is going to clarify what that is. And make it clear to human beings what exactly they're being asked to do. And then the other is to mention the bawa'ith, those things that will engender a desire to enter into ibadah. So, and this is, it's interesting. There's certain things that are left. There's certain things that Allah tells you to do and then doesn't tell you why. And then there's other things He tells you to do or not to do and tells you why. So the Qur'an explains to you, in some instances, why you're not supposed to do this. إِنَّهُ رِجْسٌ مِنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ. It's an evil thing. It's from the works of shaitan. It's going to spread dissension amongst you. Don't do it. اجتنبوه. Avoid it. So it tells you. And then there's other things, like the khinzir. It just doesn't tell you. You can talk about, well, it's because it has trichinosis. Well, now you can eliminate that. So there's Reformed Jews that say we can eat pork now because in those days, whereas Muslims, as far as I know, we might have some Reformed Muslims around, but as far as I know, I don't know of any Muslims that will say that. I haven't met one yet, but there's all kinds of amazing things out there. But I haven't met that. But there are certain things that Allah doesn't tell you. In fact, one of the ulama said that the reason pork is prohibited is because it's the best tasting meat. I read that once in a tafsir. I was like, how do you know? Because the Arabs, they say, aladdu shayma hurima. The sweetest thing is the thing that's prohibited. It's a jahili idea. People like to do things they're not supposed to do. You naughty boy. So there are things that Allah told you, and then there's things that he doesn't. And one of the wisdoms behind that is that if everything was explained to you, you might only do them for those reasons. But there are certain things you don't know, and then you do them for the sake of Allah only. So there's no musharaka in your intention. There's not like, oh, the prayer is good because you can stretch and exercise. So some people will do the prayer because, well, it's like stretching and exercise. And I've heard people say that. I heard somebody once explain to me that the reason you do sajda is to discharge electricity in your brain. Seriously, and they were very serious about it. And they said that's why, because in Maliki fiqh, it's actually preferred to pray on earth or on straw, like straw matting. And he was actually arguing that it'll discharge if it's earth or straw matting. Whereas if it's on, polyester, it'll make it worse. Something like that. But somebody could be doing that, just doing sajda to discharge. They think that it's a good thing to do. And so there's things that Allah doesn't tell you, but there's other things, because people are motivated by what? Two things. No. It's two things motivate people. What motivates people? Rewards and punishments. Right. And that's why real ethics, Kant, who was a German ethicist, talked about autonomy and heteronomy. That real ethics is when you have autonomy, that you're doing things from yourself. You're being good from yourself. Heteronomy is when you're being good because you're afraid of somebody else. And that's why, even though the hadith is not, some say it's fabricated, but the meaning is a beautiful meaning. Ni'mal abdu Suhaib. What a blessed servant is Suhaib al-Rumi. Even if there was no fire, he would not disobey Allah. In other words, he wasn't doing what he was doing out of fear of punishment. And there are servants that worship Allah because He's worthy of worship. That's the highest level. Imam al-Ghazali talks about different reasons why people worship. He said there's ibadatul abid that are afraid of being punished. And then there's ibadatul tujar, they want a reward. Like if you do this, you'll get this. And there's people that really get into that. Oh, you get 100, then they add them up and have calculators and work out. Seriously, there's people that do that. It's amazing. But there are people that do that. But then he said there's ibadatul ahrar, the servitude of the free people that have entered into this contract with Allah because they want to worship Allah out of love of Allah, because Allah is worthy of being worshipped, which is the highest. So this is what he says. And then he says that as for the ibadah of Allah, the first thing is the definition of the Qur'an. The Qur'an is the da'wat al-khalq ila ibadatillah, right? It's inviting creation to worship Allah, and then to invite them to enter into this deen, a transaction with Allah. This deen, where you do things and Allah reciprocates. So, he says the ibadah is divided into two types. Usul al-aqa'id, which are the foundations of what you believe, and ahkam al-a'mal, and then the things that you do. So our ibadah is based on two things, belief and action. If you want to use a university or a high school metaphor, you have lab, right, where you learn the theory, and then you have lab. So you do the theory, and then you have the lab. You learn the theories about how things interact, and then you go into the lab and you see it. Our deen has theory, which is things that you need to learn and understand and believe. And one of the things about learning these things is they clear up so much trouble for you. Once you learn, I'll give you an example. Muli al-Arabi, one of the really interesting scholar. He lived about 200 years ago in Morocco. But he said that he had read the Qur'an from a perspective and had a realization that the Qur'an was really challenging human beings to take responsibility. And so he said that anything that happens is really from our own selves. That you can't change anything in reality other than yourself. Because if you try to change the world and you haven't changed yourself, you just make a mess of it. Really, you make a mess of it. And there's all these people that want to change the world, but they're so disturbed in their own being. Like the man who's fighting to eliminate pornography, and he's addicted to pornography. This happens. People are contradictions. There's people that are fighting to eliminate domestic violence, and they go home and beat their wife. It's amazing. We read the same newspapers, right? This stuff happens all the time. It's so amazing, the contradictions that people carry around in them. And so he said that if you read the Qur'an from that perspective, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. God does not change a people until they change what's in themselves. Muslims want change in the Muslim world, but they're not willing to change themselves. Right? Really. We wonder why we're being treated the way we're being treated in so many places, but if you look at our societies, look how far we've fallen. Just as societies. So if you read the Qur'an, the most dangerous aspect of the Qur'an is it is criticizing us. The Qur'an is a critique. You can read it and it talks about the kuffar and all the... It's talking about... Read the Qur'an. It's talking about us. It's saying, where are you? Are you one of these people? Are you one of these people? Are you one of these people? It's talking to you. Now, you can read it and think it's all talking about these other people and I'm fine. And there's people that read it like that. But if you take the Qur'an seriously, the Qur'an is a deeply troubling book. It's a troubling book. It's what Houston Smith said, it's not a book you want to curl up at night with. And I think that's a really good description. And he wasn't making light of it at all. He's saying this book is going to challenge you. It's not for entertainment, the Qur'an. It's not a book for entertainment. So he says that it's to learn these, that the ibadah has aqa'id, beliefs, and then it has ahkam. It has rulings that relate to how you behave. So it has how you perceive the world, which is called right thinking, and then how you act in the world, which is right doing, right behavior. Istiqama in understanding and istiqama in belief. Now you have to have istiqama in your understanding in order for your actions to have uprightness. You can't have, if your actions are not based on your beliefs. العمل بلا علم جنون والعلم بلا عمل جنون والعمل بلا علم لا يكون. You can't act without knowledge. If you're building a house and something's wrong, the walls aren't matching up, you have to go back to the measurements. You have to go back to the theory behind the house. I mean, every architect knows that. And that's why it's so important. If you look at the first generation, they are the blueprint for behavior. That's why we go back to them. If we look, one of the most challenging things about the Qur'an, and this is a radical belief about Muslims, Muslims are defeated from their own actions. And if you read the early seerah, all of it, that's what they were told again and again and again. If you're defeated, it's because of your own actions. Don't worry about those people. And this is why when the Prophet ﷺ said that يُوشِكُ أَن تَدَعَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْأُمَمْ كَمَا تَدَعَتِ الْأَكَرَةُ إِلَى قَصَعَتِهَا, that the time is coming when the nations, meaning the Jews and the Christians, would gobble you up like people come to a plate and devour and consume the plate. They said, أَمِنْ قِلَّةٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ? Is it because we're few? Look at the question. They didn't say, is it because they're many? They weren't asking about them. They were saying, what's wrong with us? Because they had tarbiyah nabawiyah. They had prophetic training. They knew how to assess the situation. So their question was, أَمِنْ قِلَّةٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ? That's a logistical question. Problems with the Muslims are never logistical. بَلْ أَنْتُمْ كَثِيرُونَ. Oh, you're multitudes. You're multitudes. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ غُثَاء. But you're like froth. You're like the froth. There's no substance there. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ غُثَاء كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ. Just like a torrent, like when you have a torrent come down like a flood, it creates a froth. He said, that's what you're like. You're like that. It looks like it's substantial, but when you reach out, there's nothing there. And then he said something amazing. He said that your enemies would lose awe of you. Which is amazing. Because there was a time when the whole world was in awe of the Muslims. The whole world. They were in complete awe of them. They were worried more about Muslims attacking them. They weren't even thinking about attacking Muslims. They were worried about Muslims attacking them. They were fortifying their cities out of fear that their cities would be conquered by Muslim armies, not the other way around. And then he said something amazing also. He said that the disease that Muslims had would be wahan. Wahan. Now, wahan is an interesting word because in Arabic it means dha'f, like weakness. But Abu Hilal al-Askari, who wrote a book called Furuq al-Lugha, says the difference between weakness, which is dha'f, and weakness, which is wahan, is that wahan is the type of weakness that somebody who's strong, but they're acting like a weak person. So they have power, but they're behaving as if they were powerless. And what was that weakness? حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَهِيَةَ الْمَوْتِ. Love of material things. And distaste of sacrifice, of resistance. Which death, just sacrifice. People don't want to sacrifice. So the Prophet identified the problem in the heart. That's where he took everything. And that's what the Qur'an, if you understand the aqidah of the Muslims, it's a very, very empowering aqidah because it's telling you the problem is not outside of yourself. It's in you. And if you address the problem, you will see that things change around you. That is real empowerment. Because when you're disempowered, when you're told that, oh, the problem is they're too strong, or, oh, you can never do that, you don't have enough money, it's all outside, you're powerless. There's nothing you can do. But when you're told it begins inside you, that's something I can do. I can't make this army out there disappear, but I can change what's in myself. And then Allah will make the army out there disappear. I mean, this is the Quranic narrative. People, I don't think Muslims read it anymore and think about it. Because 100 years ago, Shakib Arsalan wrote a book, حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, explaining why the Muslims had been defeated. And it was all from this perspective. And it was one of the most widely read books in the Muslim world, and everybody accepted it. Now, nobody ever talks about that. It's all outside. It's, and I tried to explain this once to a man, I won't say where he was from, but he said, it's all the kuffar. They did this whole thing to us. And I said, no, they're a symptom. It's like a parasite on a weak body. When you have a compromised immune system, you're susceptible to sickness. If your immune system is strong, then you can ward off. He said, no, it's kuffar. And then I quoted him several verses of the Qur'an, and finally he said, that you're right, the Qur'an does say that, but the kuffar took us away from the Qur'an. So at that point I gave up. Now, so the bawa'ith, those things that engender this desire to worship Allah and to enter into this state are targhib and tarhib. Yuraghibu, to make targhib, make you desire something. Raghba and rahba. irhab, to create some fear in you. It's an unfortunate fact that these hack translators translated terrorism as irhab, because it's not irhab. It's the wrong word for it. Though irhab is a beautiful Quranic term, and it shouldn't be used like that, But unfortunately, we have a lot of these newspapers, like they call fundamentalists usuliyun, which means that you studied usul al-fiqh. I mean, you can't, you have to be careful with words. Just call them fundamentalist. I mean, there's a whole bunch of words the Arabs use that aren't from Arabic, or mabda'iyun or something. Mabda'iyun, I don't know. But not usuliyun, please. Now, here, and this is what I wanted to get to, because this is very important. All of the meanings of Qur'an are 7. Everything in the Qur'an falls under one of these 7 categories. The verse will either be about one of these or will have more than one in it. But everything in the Qur'an can be read from these 7. This is the heuristic tool that I'm giving you before we go into the chapter, which I'm not going to finish because it's a very, Yasin is, there's just so much in there. But I think this will be useful for you in your study of the Qur'an, and that's why I wanted to share it with you, because it's helped me a lot. The first is ilm al-rububiyyah, is knowledge of Allah's rububiyyah, that Allah is Rabbul Alameen. So there are verses in the Qur'an, either part or the whole verse, which indicates rububiyyah. It's telling you that Allah is Rabb. And Rabb is, most of the ulama say that it's from it's from Rababa, but you have ishtiqaq, which the last letter in the word can be replaced with other letters. So the meaning of Lord is murabbi. It's the one that nurtures you. It's the one that takes you through stages of numu' or growth. And so Allah, in relation to creation, He is Rabb, because everything in the world is from His rububiyyah. Even the reason we're here. So much went into creating you. It's amazing what your parents and all their previous, and coming together, and 9 months in your mother's womb with amazing, if you look at the mitotic cell division, all these things that are going on with the human being, there's an immense amount of the power, the divine power that's manifesting in creation, always, constantly. So ilm al-rububiyyah. And the second one is nubuwwah. It relates to prophets who are in direct communication, direct through angels and things like that. But all of us can communicate with our Lord. And there are signs, but we don't have direct access in the way that we can just simply understand what exactly God is telling us. How many times have things happened to you and you want to know, what is God trying to tell me? Everything that happens to you is to tell you something, but He's left it to us to try to work it out. But with the prophets, they tell us. And they give us this direct, so that we can really understand what is being expected from our Lord and what He wants from us. So the nubuwwah, and then the ma'ad. So ma'ad is those things, eschatology in if you want a big 50-cent word, for things that happen in the next life. The ma'ad is when we go back to Allah, and those things that are going to happen in the akhirah. And then the ahkam, which are the legal rulings, the injunctions. There are ahkam in the Qur'an. There's awamir and nawahi, injunctions and prohibitions. And then the wa'ad and the wa'id. And you have to be careful of this, because wa'ad is used for wa'id in the Qur'an. But there is a difference, and it's an important distinction, because something a lot of Muslims don't know, and I don't know if the ulama don't tell people these things because they don't want them to misuse them or abuse them, but I always find these things fascinating. And one of them is about the wa'id, but I'm not going to tell you because you have to study to find this stuff out. But what's that? I'm give this targhib for learning. So the wa'ad is God's promise, and the wa'id is His threat. That Allah threatens us. Do this and I'll give you this. Do this and I'll do this to you. So the wa'id is the threat from Allah. And then finally the qasas. So they're the stories. Now the Qur'an, all of the verses in the Qur'an relate to one of these 7 things. The Fatiha contains all 7. And this is why the Fatiha is a summation of all the meanings of Qur'an. The reason Yasin is called Qalb al-Qur'an is because it focuses on the base, the 3 essential aspects of the religion that relate to belief. The heart is the place of belief. And the Qur'an, the 3 central meanings of Yasin are uluhiyat, Allah, the rububiyyah, the nubuwwah, and the ma'ad. Those are the 3 central focuses, and those relate to aqa'id, to our beliefs, what's in our heart. And that's why it's Qalb al-Qur'an. Yasin is Qalb al-Qur'an because it's about, and that's why it's traditionally was read. The hadith is a good hadith. I mean, Imam Ahmad relates it, Nasa'i, Tirmidhi. There's some weakness in the chain. There's ittirab in the chain and things like this. But one of the madnesses of modern Muslims is this idea of throwing out all the weak hadiths. And in the history of Islam, nobody did this. There's no doubt that there's problems with the hadith literature. There's probabilities of hadith in even the soundest collections that are not 100%. But you don't throw them out. So the weak hadiths, especially if the ulama, saw good in the meaning and encouraged it, because fadail al-amal, the virtuous actions, you can use weak hadith. We don't use weak hadith for what's called ahkam or aqaid, for belief type things. But for fadail al-amal, for doing virtuous actions, they're used. And Imam Ahmad in his usul uses weak hadith, which are really hasan hadith. They're less than sahih. He uses them in ahkam. He preferred that over the opinions of men. But there are many weak hadiths about Yasin, which indicates, I mean, I did a translation of the collections of the Prophet ﷺ, and for people from the modern world, so they can understand this, weak hadiths are like C and D in a grading. You don't throw them out. You just don't use them as your example before the class, right? But they're not rejected. That's called F, which is mawdu'. F, fabricated, gets an F. Now, there are weak hadiths that get D-. They're still not thrown out because the probability that the Prophet ﷺ said it is still there. So you can't just throw it out because there is a probability that he said it. It's just the probability is not, it's like 70% as opposed to 95%, which is a lot of the hadiths that are ahad in al-Bukhari or Muslim, or, they get like 98, 99. The only hadith that gets 100% is mutawatir hadith. Like the qira'at. The sheikh that recited for us at the beginning of this learned the 10 qira'at. Why 10? 7 are mutawatira. The 3 that are called ahad are still good qira'at. They're just not mutawatira. So you don't just throw them out, you still learn them. But we recite in canonical prayer, we recite with the qira'at. But in teaching and in other things, they use the ahad and even the shadh in Arabic. There are shadh qira'at that are still learned because the Arabic is sound and there's meanings in them. But it's not permitted to use them in prayer or for any canonical purpose. But they're just not thrown out. So it's important to note that because it's a big problem. So rububiyyah is ithbat wujud al-bari. It's what istidlal alayhi bi makhluqatihi. So the verses that deal with this are to let you know that Allah is the one who brought the world into existence, and the proof for His existence is through His creation. The word in Arabic, alam, is called ismu ala. It's a type of noun which is called the noun of instrument, like tabi'. You know, a tabi' is something you print things with. Alam is something that you know things with. So the alam is the way that you know your Lord. So ilm al-rububiyyah comes from the world. The way you know, when Allah says yasma' wa yara, that He hears and He sees, how do we know that? How do we know what that means? Because we can see in here, وَلَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Nothing's like God. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. And yet, see that wow is isti'naf. It's not atf. You know, it's literally like, it's saying, and yet. Nothing is like Him, and yet. Despite nothing in the world being like Allah, He hears and He sees. Not like you hear and you see. But the only way you could even understand what that means is because you have hearing and seeing. وَلَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Nothing is like Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that, in the Qur'an, Allah is telling us that through these verses that Allah has this rububiyyah in the world. And that's the way we understand it, is through the alam, is through the creation. So all these verses about winds moving, I mean, you read these about trees and looking at وَإِلَى الْإِبْرِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ, looking at the camel and how it's created. All those are to tell you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is the Rabb al-Alameen. And then the Nabuwah is to assert that the prophets are true. And especially the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it's the one that's relevant for us. The previous ones were true, but they're no longer they're abrogated, basically. I mean, that's the proper word for it. The shara'i' allati sabaqat al-Islam nusikhat. They've been abrogated. We believe that. There is some Muslims, I mean, very small group, but there are some Muslims that say that religions are valid. You know, that still other religions. We don't say that. That's not an orthodox doctrine. And we have to assert that Islam abrogates previous dispensations. But I would add to that, and I think it's important to note, that there is a wisdom, without a doubt, why Allah has maintained the world as it is. And if you lose sight of that wisdom, you can become very arrogant about your own position. Because Muslims fall into the chosen people syndrome. Right? When the reality of it is, most of you are Muslim because you were born Muslim. You didn't even choose, it was just given to you. You know, there's some of us, it actually was a struggle to find it. But it was still a gift. I mean, I see it as a gift to even converts. But still, there was a process that you had to go through. You didn't know certain things. So it's very important to maintain humility with your faith. But it's a great blessing to be from a tradition of the prophets. But it's the greatest blessing to be from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, irrespective of whatever is happening to the Muslims. Because the people of truth are often clobbered. I mean, in fact, when Allah loves you and you're disobeying Him, He usually clobbers you as a way of getting you close to Him. I mean, that's one of the ways, and that's why you can't judge people, oh, they're getting what they deserve. No, they might be getting what Allah wants them to get in order to get close to them, and you're the one that's not getting what you deserve. People don't think about that, but that's a reality. So, how much time left? Okay. So the next is the ma'ad, and then they have karamat. The prophets have these miracles. The next is the ma'ad, which is ithbat al-hashar, and then that Allah establishes Yawm al-Qiyamah, that we will be raised up. Iqamat al-Barahin, proving that one of the things about Imam al-Farabi, he was the Imam of the logicians, Abu Faraj al-Farabi, and he was very brilliant. They say he spoke over 70 languages. Allahu A'lam. I knew somebody who spoke 28 languages, so I couldn't. And I once asked Dr. Omar how many languages he knew, and he said living or dead. So there are people that do learn lots of languages easily. I was told that if you master 3, you can crack the code, and then it just gets easy. But they call him an mu'allim al-thani, which is the second teacher, the first teacher in logic, not anything else. The first teacher was Aristotle, the mu'allim al-awwal. That's what the Arabs called him. But he said, I wish that I could meet Aristotle to ask him what he thought of man yuhyi al-'idham wa hiya ramim, who will bring the bones back to life after they've gone to dust. قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنْشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. Say he will bring them back to life, the one who brought them to life the first time. And Farabi just thought that was the most brilliant logical proof. It's called an enthymeme, where you have a minor major premise, and then you have the conclusion. So you exclude one of the premises, and you come to the conclusion without showing the full logic of it because of the intuitive understanding of it. But anyway, what he was saying there was that what God is saying really is, whoever can create a thing one time can do it a second time. God created things one time, so he can redo it a second time. So that's his proof for resurrection. It's like it was a perfect logical syllogistic proof as far as al-Farabi was concerned. So the Ma'ad, the Qur'an deals with the Ma'ad, and one of the most interesting things about the pre-Islamic Arabs is they didn't believe in the Ma'ad. All the people around the world believed in afterlife. But Arabs didn't believe in afterlife. They thought that this was it. And they actually believed that khulud was, the immortality of a person was through poetry. And so shahama in the Arabic language, ash-shahamatu al-ihtimamu bima yakhludu min al-dhikri. It's being concerned about things that will be remembered for a long time. So the shaham amongst the Arabs was the one that wanted to be remembered by doing great deeds, so that his praises would be sung by poets. But they didn't believe in a ba'ath. So it's quite extraordinary that the Prophet ﷺ and the Qur'an, that he came with this knowledge to the Arabs, but that he convinced them in 23 years. I mean, it's amazing that the Prophet ﷺ, it's a proof of how powerful this was for a people that did not believe in the Ma'ad, and within 23 years, all of them believed in it with great certainty. And obviously, the proofs in the Qur'an, there's 2 major proofs, which is the agricultural proof of just looking at land brought back to life after it's dead with water, but also the embryological proof, which is in Surah Al-Hajj. If you look at the 2 proofs, the embryological proof is a modern man's proof. And now we have cloning, which is amazing, because cloning, an-nash'at al-ula is the normal type. وَقَدْ عَلِمْتُمْ مَنْ نَشْأَةِ الْأُولَى. You knew the first way that you're going to be, that you were created. But there's a second way that you can be recreated. And it's from one, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah would recreate everybody from an indestructible seed that is in every human being. And they're going to be brought back to life from that indestructible seed, which some say is at the base of the coccyx, but Allahu A'lam. But the point is that we now know theoretically that somebody can be recreated from one small. It's amazing that they're coming up with this knowledge. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. It's going to become clear to them that this is true. How did the Prophet ﷺ know that? That there was a little seed that the whole of the human being could be recreated from. So the ma'ad is very important. There are many verses. And then the ahkam are awamir wa nawahi, commands and prohibitions, and they have 5 types. You have wajib, mandub, mubah, makruh, and haram. So everything can be categorized under one of those 5 things. But you also have in the ahkam, and this is important, you have ahkam that relate to the body, like praying and fasting relate to the body, but you also have ahkam that relate to the heart. And we forget this, that the Qur'an tells us about having khushu', about purifying our hearts. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. These are also prohibitions and injunctions. You are required to work on purifying your heart. You are required not to have pride. Pride is haram. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever enters into nobody will enter into paradise if they have a mustard seed's weight of pride in their hearts. He said, أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أَتَوَاضَعَ حَتَّى لَا يَفْخَرَ أَحَدٌ عَلَى أَحَدٍ أو لا يبغي أحد على أحد. I was commanded to be humble. تواضعوا يا عباد الله. Be humble. So pride, all these things, this is an important aspect of the Qur'an. Ikhlas. Having ikhlas to Allah. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ. They were only commanded Allah. They were only commanded to worship Allah sincerely. مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. And the religion is only for Him. Everything you do is only for Allah. So having riyah in your heart, doing things so that other people say this, that, or the other about you. And then the wa'ad is the promise of the good of the dunya and the akhirah. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Having good in this world. Victory is promised from Allah. If you obey Allah, if you do what Allah tells you, He will, and He can stop people from attacking you. He kaffa aydihum ankum bibatni Makkah. He stopped some people from harming you in that valley in Mecca. He's reminding the Sahaba, don't you remember when they could have caused you harm? Allah stopped them. Allah can stop people from doing harm. Wallahi, He can pull all these troops out. Allah does everything. هو محرك القلوب. القلوب بين إصبعين من أصابع الرحمن. All of the hearts are between, and this is anthropomorphic language, but obviously we understand it to be ما قدر الله حق قدره. They didn't estimate Allah with true estimation. But it says that the hearts are between the fingers of the merciful. And the heart is, how is it made supple? With dhikr of Allah. The heart should be, if it's supple, then it will be molded by the fingers of the Rahman. Allah will mold your heart. But if your heart becomes hard, if there's qasawa, qasat qulubuhum, their hearts become hard, then it's broken, it's crushed by Allah. That's what happens. So your heart should be supple, so that it's molded to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in this state of harshness in which it's وَلَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. It's nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then finally the wa'id, which is the warning of being, and it's iqab in dunya and akhirah, khizyun. You will have humiliation in this world if you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now people can say, well, why do the kuffar, there's people that are not worshipping Allah and they have all this izzah, and it's not real izzah, it's worldly izzah. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, everything gets switched around. Tyrants are raised up like ants in the akhirah. They're crushed by people. They're insignificant people. So the dunya, if you use the ma'yar or the standard of this world, you can become deluded about our place in this world. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And then finally the qasas are the akhbar of the prophets in the Qur'an, all the stories. And it's important. And also the stories of the righteous, like Luqman al-Hakim and the people of Ahlul Kahf. There's wisdom in their stories. There's things to learn. And also the stories of the destroyed people and why they were destroyed. Because we learn through stories. We learn through narrations. And then humans are also attracted by stories. I mean, one of the things that some of the Sahaba said to the Prophet, because the Jews had said, oh, we have stories in our book. You don't have Yeah. And if you look at Surah Yusuf came down. It's the only surah that is similar to the Bible in its narrative form. And one of the reasons for that is to show people who criticize the Qur'an for not being like other books that if Allah wanted to, He's already done that. If He wanted to make it like the Bible, He would have just revised the Bible. But this is a new message. And it's for the last people. And so it has all of the elements that are useful to the last people in it. And then finally, I'm going to quickly go over, and I'll end here, that Ibn Juzay identifies 12 sciences. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever speaks about the Qur'an from his opinion is wrong, even if he's right. And one of the things that the ulama traditionally were terrified of doing was commenting on what the Qur'an means. Because you're arrogating to yourself an understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to His creation, which is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. But many of the ulama understood that hadith to mean if you did not have the adawat, the tools of understanding the Qur'an, then you shouldn't speak about the Qur'an. There's 12 that he identifies. The first is tafsir itself. That you know that the tafsir, there's a difference between tafsir and ta'wil. Some of the ulama say that they're the same, and others say that tafsir is the outward meaning of the actual mabna. So you have like, inna is a type of, a tool in the Arabic language that's used for emphasis. All right, it's for tawqid. And so you understand what that means, the tafsir. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, innaka lamin al-mursaleen, you know that it's emphasizing that. And then the lam there is also to even create a stronger emphasis. Or that it's, you also know that it's jawab qasam, something like that. I mean, those are the tools that you need to understand. Fasar in Arabic just means kashf. It means to unveil something. And one of the things Imam Ali said about Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma is he said, يفسر القرآن كأنه ينظر إلى الغيب من وراء ستار رقيق. He interprets the Quran as if he's looking at the unseen through a gauze fabric. And that's how amazing Ibn Abbas's understanding of the Quran, because the Prophet ﷺ made that dua for him. So, tafsir, and then the qira'at. You should know the qira'at. For instance, in Yasin it says, Tanzil al-Aziz al-Hakim, which is mansoob. And then it says in Warsh, which was read tonight, Tanzil al-Aziz al-Hakim, which is marfu'. So if you don't know that there's more than one way to read that, because in one, it could be mubtada, it could be khabar of mubtada mahdhuf. In the other, it could be, it could be mansoob lil masdariya because it's saying anzalahu tanzilan or something like that. So it's mansoob ala al-masdar. There's different. If you don't know the qira'at, then you can make mistakes. And that's why you have to know qira'at, or you'll go astray in interpreting the Quran. And then you have to know the ahkam. So you have to know that there's rules in the Quran. There are verses that are abrogated. There's verses, and then naskh, which is abrogation. Like the Quran, you don't put the woman in the house until she dies. Right? That's abrogated. So you have to know those things because there's verses in the Quran that don't have applicability. And then the hadith, because if the Prophet said something about a verse, and we're fortunate, and I say fortunate because the Prophet did this for our benefit. We are fortunate that the Prophet did not. He did it as a mercy to us in enabling the Quran to be interpreted in many, many different ways. Because had the Prophet said this is what the verse meant, nobody could ever dare say it meant anything else. And so the Prophet ﷺ, as a mercy to us, it's very limited what he actually spoke about the Quran. Now one could say, well, he would have solved all the problem. That's true. But it's for this honoring human beings and their intellect and giving them the ability to think for themselves and not have everything spelled out for them, it's a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one of the blessings that the Prophet said. He said, Mawti khayrul lakum. Right? Tuhdithuna fayuhdatha lakum. My death is good for you. I mean, the greatest musibah of our ummah was his death. But he said, my death is good for you. Because you do things and rulings come down. If I stayed with you, those rulings would keep coming down until you couldn't do them all. So the fact that the revelation stopped was a blessing to people because it would have gotten too much. So, and then al-qasas, knowing the stories of the prophets, like in Habib al-Najjar, in the Surah Yasin, there's a story in there. So to know that story. Tasawwuf, which we could go on a long thing of what that means, but basically it's about tazkiyah, tasfiyah, purification of the heart. And then usul al-din, aqidah, usul al-fiqh, which is understanding, especially language. Like al-amr yadullu ala al-wujub adatan, that if a command comes in the Qur'an, it's for an obligation normally. Sometimes it's not, like kulu wa sharabu wa la tusrifu, eat and drink but not to excess. It's not haram to eat every once in a while to have your full, but generally it's makruh to do that. So there's things like that, even though that's a command. And then lugha al-Arabiya, to know the language, to know the marfu'at, the mansubat, the majrurat, to know the ishtiqaqat, to know the basic sarf of the Qur'an. And then al-bayan, which is balagha, which is ma'ani, to know badi'a, ilm al-badi'a, which is muhassinat al-lugha, how the lugha embellishes itself, to know the rhetorical devices, isti'ara, to know what majaz is, kinaya, these type things, tibaq, iltifat, understanding those things. So these are all the tools. And now there's people that think, they can just talk about the Qur'an without having studied any of this stuff. And it's a disaster because, you can really get yourself into trouble. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you and reward, inshallah, the people that have been behind this, Medina Institute. And inshallah, I hope you have a blessed time during these lessons. Really good people that we have here. So سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. الحمد لله. اللهم وفق الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم وفقنا في إسلامنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم سدد خطانا، لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك. اللهم هون علينا في هذه الأيام المصائب التي نزلت في تكساس. اللهم لا ترد علينا ردودا سيئة على المسلمين في أمريكا وفي غيرها يا أرحم الراحمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.